Welcome to episode 2 of Lessons and Lectures in Life, Listening, and Music Composition. The lessons and lectures are taken from the Technique of My Musical Language, which is a text written by Olivier Messiaen in the early 1940s, where he broke down the elements of his musical style, the harmonic, rhythmic, and melodic components that he worked with in the early part of his career. In the first episode, we looked at the preface of the book, and we talked quite a bit about how I felt that this music and the study of this music in particular lent itself to an understanding of what it is to be a human listening to music in general. So although the program here is specifically about the music of Messiaen, I think there's something uniquely suited to the music of Messiaen to lead us into an understanding of human phenomenon. So there's the life lessons, and listening and music composition to me are two sides of the same approach. Some of it's right music, but we are all composing our lives, and the analogy holds, the analogy passes. So today, I'm going to talk about chapters 1 and 2, both very short chapters, and still summation and introduction of ideas. So in the preface, Messiaen is talking about his influences and introduces us to, I think, why he thinks music is important. The title of chapter 1 is called The Charm of Impossibilities and the Relation of the Different Subject Matters. And the title of chapter 2 is Ragavadana Hindu Rhythm. In the first chapter, he introduces the core idea of retrograde and non-retrograde. And he spends much of the rest of the book talking about what those ideas mean and how they can be realized in the different aspects of music. And in the second chapter with Hindu rhythm, he talks about a specific process of meter. And between the two of them, you get a good sense of the words that are going to be important as we read through the book. So chapter 1, the charm of impossibilities and the relation of the different subject matters. And that relation, that crux, is this idea of retrograde and specifically non-retrograde. So what does that mean? Retrograde is a word that means something very specific in music. It means that the ordering of the pitch and the rhythm are reversed. Absolutely. It is a horizontal process. But because it is rhythmic, it is more than just the sequencing of the pitch. It is the reverse of the rhythmic, the meter. So if you have three notes, like very short, long, so dum, du, dum, like 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. If you were to retrograde that, the rhythm would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. And if there were notes A, B, C, then the retrograde would be C, B, A. So it would be C, 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 B, B, A in terms of pitch and duration. So that's retrograde. Non-retrograde is a pattern that is the same forwards as it is backwards. Right? So let's see, you've got A, B, A, where it's like 1, 1, 2, 1, 1. So the whole pattern is 4 beats. But you got 1, 1, 2, 1. 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1. Profoundly simple idea, but one that for Messiaen ties together the meter of a piece, and he'll extend this out into quite enormous structures. Remember that this is going to be dissected and expanded upon for the rest of the book. The extension and expansion of meter within its retrograde pattern, the breaking of a pattern once it's been established. These are things that we'll get to later, but it's very important in the term of this chapter 1 to understand the idea of a non-retrogradable mode, a rhythmic mode. He says here, knowing that music is a language, we shall seek at first to make melody speak. The melody is the point of departure. So the idea of a melodic contour. He describes harmony as being within the latent. Harmony is latent within the melody. He says, we shall not reject the old rules of harmony and form. Let us remember them constantly, whether to observe them or to augment them or to add to them some others still older or more recent. And this is where he holds up plain chant and Hindu rhythm in his sort of in his inner geography. Hindu rhythm and liturgical plain chant are equally ancient and equally robust in their ability to be used in contemporary music. Then in modern music, he's very much talking about Debussy and the harmonic stasis that Debussy can introduce in a single chord. One point will attract our attention at the outset, the charm of impossibilities. And this is really what he's referring to by the impossibility of retrograding a non-retrogradable mode, a rhythmic mode. It is a glistening music we seek, giving to the aural sense voluptuously refined pleasures. At the same time, this music should be able to express some noble sentiments. The word glistening is transportative. I think you have to go back to the poem that we listened to in the first episode. Do you remember? It was the Pierre Reverdy poem, and it ends with the line about what light is left shining at the edge of a white rock. That sort of brief touch of the light on an object. So when he's talking about glistening, he's not necessarily talking about just like sort of diamonds and sparkles. He's talking about a quality of light that is the briefest touch. And what is left behind the light is as important as the light itself. And how to create that in sound with the charm of the impossibility of a non-retrograde rhythm is part of the technical elements that he uses to construct this. And I can't get over how many times he uses the word voluptuous here as well. So you can feel this combination of sort of a combination of like an absolutely crystalline structure, and then around it is this sort of luscious adumbration of light and sound. He talked about retrograde, which is the horizontal rhythmic component. There's also the vertical transposition. Again, this is another word that means something very specific in music. Transposition is the movement up or down of a set of pitches where the intervals between those pitches stay the same. Right? So again, using my fingers again, if I've got this and then this, as a transposition would be maybe I move my thumb up to here, but then I can't. Right? So the relationship between the thumb and the finger here remains the same. The starting point is different. The relationships between them is the same. They've been transposed. Right. So I'm transposing down like all of this. This is the way to think of transposition in the vertical axis of harmony. Right? And then you have the rhythmic aspect of retrogradability. And again, there are modes of limited transposition where in this case, you only have two modes. Right? You've got here, here, and then at a certain point, get back to the same pitch. And then that is the limited mode of transposition. So in chapter 1, he introduces the terms retrograde, non-retrograde, transposition, limited transposition, modes of limited transposition. Chapters 3 through 19, the rest of the book, he's talking about the application of those ideas. But what we should get from this chapter 1 is that the unlikeliness of the constraint of non-retrogradability and of limited transposition gives a particular force and coherence to those elements. Then those can be used to derive much more complicated pieces. The truth of harmony existing latent within the melody is a piece that really sticks with me from this section. Functional harmony is based on voice leading and chords built up over the common practice, with the expectation that certain chords will resolve through other chords back to the tonic. What Messiaen is describing here is non-functional in that sense. There's no reason why those chords are next to each other in a systematic way, other than the relationships that are defined by their retrogradability and the relationships horizontally and vertically. This relationship is, I think, what Messiaen means when he talks about glistening and voluptuousness. The interpretation of the harmony and of the meter in the moment of its instantiation is a different experience than if you're following a Bach chorale where the voice leading is moving along, which isn't to say there isn't counterpoint or voice leading in Messiaen, but the underlying decision that drives all of the music are these vertical and horizontal decisions, are these vertical and horizontal improbabilities. My friend Lowry used to talk about this. He would say that all French music, whether it's Saint-Saëns or Ravel, Messiaen, or much earlier to the choirs of Saint-Chapelle, that the music was essentially stained glass. That to understand French music, to understand French aesthetics, you have to start with the enormous rose windows done at Chartres or Notre Dame, and that this was the central expression of a very French aesthetic that survives in things like the Bride Ascending by Duchamp, which is the big glass piece, or the music of Messiaen with its superficial flamboyance over these constraints, these improbable constraints on the content of the music. And yeah, that rang true when he said that. When I was a student, the music building in the college was next to a lake, more like a pond, really. A pond. It's sort of the main lobby, which you had to walk through to get to the different practice rooms and rehearsal areas. We looked out over a wall of glass, a big glass wall, and you could see the lake, the pond, and quite often at the end of the day, the light would be reflecting on the water with a breeze going. And it's the kind of thing where if you stare at it, at first it is all jittery, but at a certain point, your eyes stop focusing, and there's a pattern that's just there. It's like a standing wave that's just held with the light, and the light moves over the water, and it's not that the water is moving anymore. There's this pattern that's emerged with the combination of the light and the wind and the water, and it really doesn't change. It's a trick of the eye. It's a trick of what happens when you stare at something for too long. But there is so much music from the turn of the century French style that has water and reflections. Debussy has music about reflections in the water, and Ravel has the same. And then you get to Messiaen, where the same idea is there, but the poetry has been replaced with, instead of talking about the reflections of the water, now he's talking about the pattern that's captured in the light on the water. I had a teacher there who said that playing Ravel was like playing the piano behind a pane of glass. And he took it very seriously, as he should. Ravel deserves to be taken very seriously. And he said sometimes it feels like playing on broken glass as well. Those beautiful, lovely harmonies that are aching under the fingers. So that's chapter 1, the charm of impossibilities and the relation of the different subject matters, the relation being that improbability of non-retrogradability and limited transposition. Chapter 2, Ragavardhana Hindu rhythm. Okay, so the key in this chapter is the idea of ametricality. It's one word, ametrical. Now, what does Messiaen mean when he says ametricality? Right, he doesn't mean polymetric. He doesn't mean syncopated. Those are different words, right? So not syncopation, not polyrhythm, ametricality. So what is ametricality? Well, start with holding in your mind that it is the idea of the feeling of a short value arranged in different groupings. Keep that in mind to start with. Messiaen starts by saying, before continuing, I pause to specify that in my music and in all the examples of this treatise, the values are always noted very exactly. Whether it is a question of barred passages or not, the reader and the performer have only to read and execute exactly the values marked. In the passages not barred, which are the most numerous, I've saved the use of the bar line to mark the periods and to give an end to the effect of accidentals. Now, rhythmic notation is something that he talks about a lot in chapter 7, and we'll get to that. But the idea that he is not setting a time signature and then laying out the rhythm against that time signature. He has these arrangements of multiple short rhythms grouped together that form a pattern, like the non-retrogradable rhythm extended out. So writing in a time signature is often unnecessary when you're looking at ametrical music. But we still haven't defined what it means yet. What does ameter mean? Ametrical. So Messiaen says, we shall replace the notion of measure and beat by the feeling of a short value and its free multiplications, which will lead us towards a music more or less ametrical, necessitating precise rhythmic rules. So the very first example that Messiaen provides in the book is actually a rhythm from the Rite of Spring. Now, the way that Messiaen describes this, he says that Stravinsky drew one of his most striking rhythmic procedures, the augmentation or diminution of one rhythm out of two. And you can see in the example here, he's got A, B, A plus B. You can see here he's got A, B, A plus B. And the point that he's making is that A plus is a diminution of A, whereas B stays the same. So this idea of the augmentation and diminution of rhythmic shapes and the alternation of rhythmic cells where one will change on the other is incredibly important, and again becomes central to the detailed discussion that's coming up. Remember that Messiaen is just introducing the idea here. The second example is from a specific Hindu rhythm, the Simhavikradita. So now the rhythmic cell starts with A as a eighth note and then B as a dotted quarter. B is always a dotted quarter, but you can see how A moves from being an eighth to a quarter, to a dotted quarter, to a quarter, and back to an eighth. So if I just clap A on its own, it goes 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. Whereas B is always 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So when you put those together, you've got, and I'm going to try and do it with different sounds where I'll tap A here, A, and then B, right? So 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3. So I don't know very much about Hindu rhythms. He's referring to rhythms that he finds from he's referring to Karnika Deva, a Hindu theorist from the 13th century, and he says that Karnika Deva has left a table of 120 dekitalas, or Hindu rhythms. And those are the rhythms, like in these examples, where they're very specific. And those rhythms look a lot like what we see in the examples here. He gives another example, the Ragavadana, which is the chapter, the Ragavadana. And you can see in example 3, we have an eighth note, a dotted eighth note, an eighth, and then a dotted half note. So example 3, it would be very difficult to read this as syncopated against a quarter note beat, or even an eighth note beat. You really need to think of it as groupings of a 16th note, right? So you've got a grouping of 2, then 3, then 2, and then 12, the dotted half note, 3 quarter notes, 12 16 notes. I say it that way because I just spent 20 minutes saying that it was 10 16 notes, because sometimes I just get everything wrong when it comes to math. So think of the tick. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Right. And then example 4 is the same, but now reversed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. Right. So Ragavadana forward and backwards. In this last example, Messiaen draws attention to the fact that B is really a diminution of A. We have 3 quarter notes, diminution to 3 eighth notes, except that there's a dot in the middle one, which makes an inexact diminution. And that idea of adding or subtracting small increments from the patterns to give it that. So what Messiaen has done in these first 2 chapters is lay out the ideas of retrograde and non-retrograde, transposition, limited modes of transposition, and then the idea of augmentation and diminution, where patterns are related to each other if the metrical units are equivalent, whether they are longer or shorter. So 3 quarter notes is related to 3 eighth notes. And then the idea that that metrical balance can be offset and shifted by the addition of a dot is very important. And in fact, the final paragraph in chapter 2, Messiaen says, from these statements, very insignificant in appearance, we can conclude, first, it is possible to add to any rhythm whatsoever a small, brief value which transforms its metric balance. Second, any rhythm can be followed by its augmentation or diminution according to forms more complex than the simple classic doublings. Third, there are rhythms impossible to retrograde. Right? And then that's what we're going to launch into and study for the rest of the book. So this is bloomin' awkward, but I thought I would practice this and really emphasize the idea of alternation of rhythms. I'm going to have a melody that I'll define with just a couple of notes. And let's say I'm going to start like this. And then maybe right. So those are my pitches. And then let's say that I am going to do something very basic with my duration. Let's say I want it to be, I'm going to have 1, 3, 5, and 7, because I'm a good medievalist and I've read my Messiaen, and I've read my Monks of Salem and my Greek theory. So I'm going to come up with a pattern where I repeat these pitches and I repeat these rhythms into a melodic gesture. I'm going to make a rule that says that I can only use the whole values of this. So I can only have one value of 3 rather than 3 values of 1. Just for the purposes of this exercise, I'm not going to consider these equivalent. I'm going to focus on this. So again, I'm really trying to constrain and limit to focus in on what we're doing. So if I do that, and here's my first cell. So the F sharp is 1, and I'm going to do it in 16th notes. 1, and then 3, so my dotted 8th note, and then 5, so quarter note and 16th, like that. And then 7, like that, right? 4 plus 3 is 7. So here's my 1, my 3, my 5, and my 7. And then I'm going to do another 1. But here, now I've got this. And then a 3. And I'm going to go through this twice, right? So I've gone through, this is now my first statement of the pitch content. So I want to do a 5, and I want to go back to my F, so I'm going to do F sharp rather. Yep. 5. And now my 7. And then my 1. And my 7, 1, and then my 3. My 5. And my 7 back here. Right, 1, 3, 5, 7. And that's my second statement there. Now I want to alternate it with something that is always going to be the same. So if this was A, I'm going to call my B, I'm going to have it be much simpler, right? I want my B to be, I'm just going to have it be 2 notes, a D and a G. And I'm going to have them always be an 8th note. So, one way then that I can realize this is to alternate between this and this, right? Just in and out, so, and then always the 8th note. I don't want to lose track here. There's my 7. And Then I'm going to go back up here to 2, and then I've got a 1 and a 2, and then my F sharp 3. So this is now my end of my A statement, but you can see I've alternated it. And then I come in, and I'm going to do this on the second line so I don't run out of space. Do my 5, and then 2, 7, 2, 1, 2, 3. Oops. I squeeze it in there. And 7. Like that. Right. So then to play this little masterpiece, remember I'm just going to count it in 16th notes. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So remember, I've got the 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? And then I'm alternating against the B section, which is always just going to be it's actually quite pretty.